Good morning, Ruth. It's nice to have you here.
Good morning, Rebecca.
And Paul, I recognize that voice.
I thought you might.
Yep.
Rebecca, I heard the governor allude to the fact that he wanted to support broadband as critical infrastructure. I just didn't hear it.
Yeah, he's proposed a few $1 million.
Yeah, I saw the money. I'm just thinking, change that critical infrastructure law, the one that established that tax benefit. Just put a clause in there that adds that to it.
Write that up and email it to me, okay, Paul?
Okay. I shall.
Thank you.
That's Kelleigh Cole.
Well, I hope people keep hopping on, especially those that are right at the beginning of the meeting, because we have a packed agenda. Good morning, Doug, Jared, Jack, Kira.
Good morning.
Morning, good morning. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Hey, Roger.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've got Colleen.
Good morning.
Good morning. That's a nice photo. That is not the Utah Capitol.
No, it's not. It's the Washington, D.C. Capitol. Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I liked that. I got to see the senators and congressmen that day, so it's very nice. Or that trip,
Oh.
you know.
Wow. Very good.
The
Very good.
days on that trip. It was very fun.
And it looks like a beautiful day too.
Yeah, and we assume that photo wasn't taken last Wednesday.
Exactly. If it was, I'd look a lot worse in my eyes or something.
You were there.
Be blacked out or something. I don't know. Knocked out. No, Not last Wednesday.
How are we doing in the waiting room? Larry? Hey, Jason? Oh, he's walked away. How are we doing, Larry? We got everybody in that's waiting.
There's 31 participants. Points, 33 now.
Gonna give them about 1 more minute. It's nice to see so many participating. I know there's a number that aren't able to come always, but it's just been an interesting year with COVID and broadband, and there's certainly a much larger interest amongst the entire community, rural and urban, and our schools. We've been working quite a bit with them this last year. And UETN has worked with them closely to get connections for the students. And the governor released his budget yesterday, which it's good to see he has a strong focus on broadband and digital inclusion. So we'll see where the legislature takes that. I'd like to get started. We have a full agenda, and I just want to make sure that we give everyone the chance that I've asked to come, and appreciate you all coming. I'm Rebecca Dilge, and I am the Rural Outreach and Broadband Manager for the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's been my pleasure to be serving you for the almost 3 years now. We're coming around that corner. And we have, I've met some people within this last quarter that are also working towards broadband and digital inclusion. And we're going to give them a couple of minutes right here at the beginning to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about what they're doing. Where we're meeting virtually now, we have a different setup, and we're not able to go around our boardroom and introduce each other. But I've given ourselves 15 minutes here. So if there's any time at before 10:15, and anybody else would like to make a brief introduction, we'll give you a minute. So I see Daniel Parkins is here. He's with the United Way of Central and Southern Utah. So if everybody else could make sure your phones or mics are muted, and then we'll give him, Daniel, a minute or two.
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate it. I'll be really quick. I did create something very short to share. So if it's all right, I'd like to share my screen just real quick. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone needs to mute, and I will mute as well. Make sure we're not getting feedback.
Sorry about that. Okay, so my name is Daniel Parkins. I work with United Way of Utah County, also known as United Way of Central and Southern Utah. And I am supporting and participating in their digital inclusion program. So real quick, our theory of change, the impact that we want to try and create is for communities and individuals to gain greater access to economic, social, and personal opportunities through full digital equity. These are some of the activities that we are hoping to develop. And the reason why these activities are kind of generalized is because we like them to be flexible and to be able to fit into a number of different funding models. So To give you an idea of what this theory of change looks like on the large scale, very quickly here, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the impact that I just talked about. These are some of the long-term income outcomes that we'd like to have in our program. So these are going to be, down the road, but part of my participation in this group here is to try and achieve some of these longer-term outcomes. Specifically, this one in the middle, where we develop a robust interdependent network of for-profit, nonprofit, and government organizations that can fully support local communities' digital needs. That's one of the things that we're looking for here. In order to achieve these long-term development goals, we have these midterm outcomes that we're looking for as well in community engagement, digital education, capacity building, and the building of professional networks and organizational networks. Some of these preconditions for our personal organization are set here, as well as the inputs and the activities that we hope to develop. So in brief, what this means for you and for my participation in these meetings here is that United Way is actively seeking partnerships and is willing to work with private partners as well as public partners in order to develop digital inclusion efforts throughout the state of Utah. And so that's about it. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, if I can figure that out.
Great, thanks, Daniel. And if you would send those to me, we'll be sure and get them on our webpage. So if anybody would like to access that after the meeting, we'll have that available. And I would like to tell everyone that Daniel was very involved in working to get grants written for some broadband projects. So he is true to his word. Next, if we have Jennifer Patterson with Further Enterprise Solutions. It's a turnkey networks for communities. So we'll give her a minute or two.
Hi there, this is Jennifer Patterson. I'm with Further Enterprise Solutions. I'm the West Region Sales Manager. I appreciate the introduction, Rebecca, and I'm gonna turn on my cam here in a moment. I'm just navigating to a new room. Thank you for the opportunity, everybody, to speak. I just wanted to introduce myself and our company. We are an engineering services firm where we have been longstanding in the wireless industry, primarily serving the carriers, but definitely interfacing with regional carriers, and if you're familiar with WISPs, the broadband folks as well. So we had a meeting with Rebecca recently, just sharing our information and just further evolving the conversation as to what is important for the Utah broadband team here. And so she was gracious enough to introduce me to you guys. And so primarily we focus in a full gamut of service offerings that generally starts with the RF side of it, looking at coverage analysis, doing a deep dive into what the coverage potential is for these folks that are rural, and then evolving that into installation, integration, all the way through to construction. So it's kind of a full scale solution. We've been working with a number of CBRS folks, fixed wireless folks. I have a background in microwave backhaul, so just kind of a full gamut. And I just wanted to briefly just say hello. It's a real learning curve networking with you guys. So I just wanted to put a brief little blurb out there and just say hello and look forward to learning more from you guys. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jennifer. If you would be so kind, if you want to put your either an email or contact information and your website in the chat box.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Take a look at that. Thank you. And Steve Hill, he's the president of Satellite Broadcasting and Communications Association. And I just met with him just, was it just last week or before?
It was last week around this time.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Glad to have you.
Thank you, Rebecca. My name is Steve Hill from the Satellite Broadcast Communications Association, and I represent the consumer-based satellite companies. So I work with AT&T and Dish Network, but also with HughesNet and Viasat, who are the two current satellite internet providers. And I just want to introduce myself. We want to be part of the overall state solution for broadband, especially in rural markets. Currently, we have over 2.2 million customers offering, and we offer speeds throughout the country of about 25.3. starting the end of this coming year, we've got 2 new satellites going up, one from each company, and both of those will be able to offer 100 meg service anywhere in the United States. So we're looking really see a vast improvement, really about an 8-time capacity and a huge improvement on speeds in the coming year. So a lot of interesting stuff happening with our industry. SpaceX, there's a lot of great stuff. So hopefully in the future I can brief everybody more in depth of what we're doing, but I wanted to just introduce myself and say, you know, we're here, we want to be part of that overall solution, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Great. And if you do the same, Steve, if you want to put your contact information in and your website, is there a question? Okay, make sure everyone, does someone have a question? Like we have a couple of minutes. If you have a question for any of these 3, or if you would like to take a minute to introduce yourself, if you're new here, which there might be a lot of people that are new here today. Going once, going twice.
Rebecca, this is Douglas Meredith with URTA. I have a question for Steve Hill. You'd mentioned Viasat. I didn't capture the other satellite company that was in your
association. Oh, yes, HughesNet.
HughesNet. And
Right.
Is SpaceX going to be or part of your association?
We're working on getting SpaceX, OneWeb, and Amazon engaged also. Those are the 3 companies that are looking to do the low Earth satellite. SpaceX, as everybody knows, Elon Musk is a bit of a wild card, so bit of an uphill battle there, but we look to be inclusive of all satellite technologies.
And then when you mentioned the 100 megabits per second download speed, is that at scale, or is that just in testing, or
No, that's available today. And so if you're in a market with 100 meg speed, you're going to be able to do that. If there's 100 customers in that same market, they're all going to be getting 100 meg service at the same time. Our technology works a little bit different than a wired technology in that you have a direct connection to that satellite. So unlike if you have a lot of people on the same street and they're using a wired connection, things could slow down. We really don't have that particular issue because we're connecting directly to essentially that to the satellite, and then that's going back to the server. So a little different way than with wired technology and performance.
Well, wired technology cable is what you're describing.
Yes, exactly.
DSL is as direct as yours.
Yeah. So, and then one of the things Satellite 2 is they won the FCC award for best advertised performance last year. So it's, you know, when they say 25-30 is sort of, that's not aspirational, that's reality.
Thank you very much, Steve.
You're welcome.
Steve?
Yes.
I have a question. Historically, the big issue with satellite has been the power requirements for the receiving side on the ground to reach back up to the satellite. What are the power requirements you've got?
In what way? I mean, we're able to just, you know, like as long as we've got electricity, we're able to deliver.
Okay, so it's really fixed point stuff. You're not doing it in mobile.
No, the mobile application is really not. I think we're going to be looking at that more in the 2023, 24. Once the new satellite comes up, we are able to see some mobile in the marine market, but as we're traveling, it tends to not. And issues tend to be on the mobile, not on the power is the fact that we have to continuously track that satellite if we're moving. However, with satellite, we are using it very extensively on disaster recovery. So the California fires, those type of things, because we can get to a location with a generator, a satellite internet terminal, and be able to immediately offer internet service to for the disaster recovery. And that's something we've been doing now for many years.
One other quick question. I got in a little bit late. I apologize, Andy Bethmeyer. What's your satellite? What's your spectrum backhaul? What are you using for backhaul the spectrum?
I'm not sure.
What spectrum are you communicating using?
We're at the geosynchronous orbit at a 12.5 gigahertz.
No. Okay, 12.5 gigahertz download, upload for the spectrum you're moving there.
So
Tell you what, Andy, I've invited Steve to present at our next broadband meeting.
Okay,
If you'll
great.
put your contact information in, Steve, then
I
you can
did,
get
and Andy,
specific. Okay,
and
I
Andy,
see
if
it
you have
now.
specific questions, just email me. I'll be happy to get anything you want.
Yeah,
Great.
and I think I'll look forward to having a more detailed presentation from you. And speaking of which, our next meeting is scheduled for April. Just think on this. I'm wondering about moving our meetings to every other month at least. It seems like we have a lot of content and not enough time to do this all, but we might, just let me know, just considering that, doing it at least every other month. So that would be March. Our next presenter, so thank you very much, Steve, and the others that introduced themselves. It was really good to learn about you. I was very interested. It was very interesting to me as well when I met with them, and certainly needed to invite them to come. I'm very honored to have Mr. Tom Wheeler with us today. He's according to his bio, is a businessman and author, and was chairman of the Federal Communications Commission from 2013 to 2017. He is currently a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution and a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. And I learned about him by attending so many of these now available Zoom meetings nationally, and it was I've seen you more than once, so it was probably at one of the libraries presentation, but he was talking about the 5 steps, or I looked him up and read his paper on the 5 steps to get the internet to every American, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we need right here. We need to hear about that here in Utah. It was very, very good. And so I invited him, and he graciously accepted to present this topic with us today. So we've given him a broad amount of time. I requested, I think it was 20 minutes to present and 20 minutes for questions. And I think I had to scale it down to 15 minutes for questions. So if we're okay with that, Tom, we'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Well, Rebecca, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for the privilege of being invited. You know, I love to listen to the stories that Daniel and Jennifer and Steve were talking about. But I also must admit that as I sat here watching everybody's postage stamp, I also thoroughly enjoyed Kelleigh's exchange with her dog as he kept trying to jump on her lap, and it's the whole new experience that we're learning about as we all work from home. But I mean, there can be no better commercial for the kind of thing that we're talking about and the importance of broadband connectivity. I mean, Rebecca said it right at the outset that COVID has made broadband more important. I will say essential than I think was appreciated before. You know, I mean, it was, well, you know, I mean, when I was chairman, you know, broadband, well, you know, we needed to get Netflix and, you know, sort of some gamers and things like this. I mean, that's not, you don't hear that anymore. This is an essential service, and we need to start treating it that way. Rebecca referenced the piece that I wrote for the Brookings Institution, 5 steps to get the internet to all Americans. The interesting thing is it was written in May, and as you all know, in this kind of field, there's all kinds of changes that happen. As I said, broadband is even more important today than it was in May. We have seen the federal government in the COVID stimulus bill step up and provide some more monies, insufficient monies, but more monies for broadband. And we have lived through the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction, which to my way of thinking it was a great idea, but unfortunately poorly administered, and we'll talk about some of those issues in a second. As I'm sure you all recognize, because I'm talking to broadband pros here. I mean, there are two issues when we're talking about broadband. One is the question of availability. We don't even know the answer to that question. Okay, the FCC says there are 18 million people that don't have access to broadband. There are independent studies that said that number could be 42 million. But we do know, just regardless of what the number is, there's too many. Too many Americans can't get access to broadband. So you've got the availability problem, and then you've got the adoption problem. You know, the Census Bureau says that there are 3 times as many people that have not adopted the broadband going past their door as there are folks who don't have any access to it at all. And the largest part of that, it seems, again, we're working on imperfect information, are those Americans that can't afford it. And the huge cohort of those is the 10 million or so students in K to 12 who can't go to school, but can't attend school at home because they don't have broadband access. So I think on both of the metrics of availability and adoption that we have failed. And it hasn't gotten better recently. You know, the last 5 years, we spent about $22 billion for rural, and we still have those great gaps. The Trump FCC stepped up and cut back support for low-income Americans. As Rebecca said, I was running the FCC from 2013 to 2017. And so I will raise my hand and say, I share in some of that culpability. I know how hard it is to make progress within the existing programs. And so one of the reasons I wrote that piece that Rebecca referenced is that we need to overhaul what we do, how we act as a country on this essential service. And we need to use COVID as an incentive to do the kind of overhaul that we've been unwilling to do thus far. So let me just kind of tick through the 5 things, and then I'll shut up and be happy to talk about anything that you want to talk about. The first is that we need to demand high speed. And Steve, I appreciate what you and your satellite companies are doing, but I think this means a fiber first strategy. You know, I was the guy who was chairman, increased the definition of broadband to 25.3. It is now inadequate. You know, I looked up on the Broadband Now has got a great on their website has got a great calculator as to what kind of throughput you need. And a family of 4 with 4 mobile devices, 3 TVs, couple of gaming consoles, 2 tablets, and 1 Alexa, according to their calculation, needs 179 Mbps. Clearly 25 is inadequate. The Trump FCC has refused to recognize that because, of course, if you increase it, you decrease the penetration, and that has political consequences. I think that it was the failure to deliver a fiber first strategy that was the RDOF's, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF's greatest failure. You know, they budgeted to spend $16 billion and spent $6.8 billion. They thought they were designing a service that favored, or an auction that favored gigabits. But it didn't end up that way. They ended up favoring those who would assert the ability to deliver rather than having demonstrated A, the technology works, or B, they got a capability of doing it. So we've got $9 billion that the FCC had in its budget that's unspent, and unspent money means unserved areas. And my concern is that even the spent money is high risk. As we were closing down the operation of the Obama FCC to transition to the Trump FCC, we did a report that showed that said we've got to change the way we do this, and that we ought to be paying for broadband like we pay for highways or airports or anything else. And what would that cost? And we estimated that it would cost about $40 billion to deliver fiber to 85% of the unused locations. And that it would then cost another $40 billion to get to the last 15% and require an OPEX subsidy for them as well. But that this was a solution, but the solution began with fiber first. Second recommendation I make in my paper is that we need to be paying directly for this service. As I said, if we build highways and airports this way, why can't we build broadband? For too long, we have subsidized OPEX in the hope that it would somehow affect CapEx. I used to hate the rate of return, the negotiations we had to have with rate of return carriers. Well, if we give you this much, will you build out that much? Here, RDOF had the right idea, pay it directly. But there they fell into the third recommendation that I had, which was pay any qualified contractor. The biggest RDOF winner, $1.32 billion, was a small Las Vegas company that defaulted on some of the money that they had won in the CAF2 auction and promised to build fiber to over 500,000 locations in 15 states, despite experience with having done that. The reason that in my paper I said we need to pay any qualified contractor is that was the basis of the reforms that we made in the E-rate program, and it worked like a charm. Here's in 2013, when the only companies that got paid for E-rate were eligible telecommunications carriers. It cost about $22 per megabit. That's what we were paying. In 2019, after any qualified competitor was allowed to offer service, that had gone down to $2.25 per Mbps. And 95% of the schools were connected, whereas about a third of them were connected before. And I know, Steve, that you were talking about trying to get Elon Musk in as a member. I think we got to think about what's the definition of a qualified contractor who deserves this kind of subsidy. And Musk's Starlink got about $800 million in the RDOF auction to pay for what it's already offering. or already has a plan to offer. So gets the opportunity to double dip, if you will. And you got to ask yourself the question, why am I doing that if that service is already going to be provided? So the fourth thing is that we need to support activities by state and local governments to provide broadband. You know, God bless your task force and what you all are doing. But, you know, Utah is one of the 22 states that has either prohibits or has some kind of restrictions on the ability of municipalities to offer broadband service. When I was chairman, we tried to preempt those laws on the grounds that if you're not happy with the broadband service you're getting, or you're not getting any, that the people ought to have the right to organize through their local government to solve the problem. And we preempted these kind of state laws. Unfortunately, the ISPs took us to court, and the Sixth Circuit ruled that that was further than the Communications Act gave us authority. But as I say, it just seems to me that local governments have a role to play in this as well. And inhibiting that does not encourage broadband. And finally, the fifth point was that everybody counts or nobody counts. Yes, we've got the rural issue, but also we've got the question of adoption and affordability. And if the average cost of broadband connections is $60 or so, and if Pew Research is right, in which they said they found that about half of those who could subscribe but don't subscribe do so, make that decision because of cost. And a Benton's Foundation study that showed that the typical low-income American family could pay about $10 a month, then why don't we step up and support that? You know, companies like Comcast and Charter have $10 a month, 25 free services for low-income Americans, but we don't support them. You know, we're dealing with a program that was designed for telephone companies back in the Reagan era, the so-called Lifeline program, and therefore the cable companies with their $10 a month broadband connectivity aren't eligible to participate. I tried to change that when I was chairman by having a national ETC, eligible telecommunications carrier system, set up. The Republicans on the commission, who then took over as the Trump FCC, opposed it and obviously did not put that in during their tenure. But what we have seen over the last 4 years is an effort by the Trump FCC to limit who can provide Lifeline services, to mean that broadband basically has to come from a mobile device, to create requirements that make it unlikely that mobile carriers will be able to meet the levels of service, and not to facilitate, again, how you could embrace true high-speed broadband on a wired basis. And as a result, you know, Lifeline subscribers are down. There were about almost 13 million when we left, and they're about 7 million, a little over 7 million today. Support is down substantially. Participation is down from about a third of those who were eligible participated to less than 20%. So those are my 5 points. A couple of closing observations. One is that the Biden administration, I think, has an opportunity to change this. Joe Biden, during the campaign, talked about a $20 billion broadband stimulus. One would imagine that there's going to have infrastructure legislation this will be part of. The House has already passed a $100 billion number twice. So you can hope that that goes up. But the fascinating thing is that the Biden administration is confronted by 4 existential crises: the pandemic, the economy, social justice, racial equality, and climate change. How you deal with with issues, and what are the issues you deal with when you're confronted with those kind of existential crises, reframe decision-making in government. But there's one issue that cuts across all of them, and that's broadband. And so that's why I'm hopeful that we're going to see some serious federal broadband investment in the new administration and the new Congress, and that it will be based on a fiber first strategy, which is not, you know, Jennifer, to go against the kind of things you were talking about insofar as WISPs, but to recognize that WISPs and satellite and other services that are not future-proofed and today high-speed like broadband ought to be the secondary choices that you use to fill in the holes that you can't get to by a legitimate investment to build fiber. So I'll shut up there, be happy to respond. I've seen somebody had a hand up through the whole thing that I've been ignoring, but would be happy to respond to anything you want to raise.
Thanks, Tom. Let's go right to the questions if there are some, especially the hand that was up. I guess I wasn't paying attention as well. Whoever that is, we have some agreements.
I had my applause reaction, but not.
Oh, that was applause. Oh my goodness! I definitely should have stopped then.
I have a couple of questions. Joe.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rebecca. So I've got 2 questions for you, Mr. Wheeler. First of all, thank you so much for hearing your insight into kind of what might be coming next is really fascinating. I'm Joe Silverswag. I do local government affairs work for Comcast here, and appreciate the shout out for Internet Essentials.
Is Kyle really still out there, Joe?
Weaver?
No, Kyle McSlaro. Is he still your?
Yes, he is. Yes,
president?
he is. I think he's changed roles, but he still works for Comcast in a similar capacity.
First class guy.
Yeah,
absolute
yeah, he's beloved around here for sure.
Well, if you see him, tell him that Wheeler was asking for him, will you?
Okay, will do. So I have 2 questions, really pretty different questions. So I think I'll ask one and then we'll see who else has questions and maybe circle back around to the other. You mentioned, and something that we've seen with Comcast and Internet Essentials is that there's an access gap and there's a pricing gap, but there's also an adoption gap. There is a group of individuals for whom it is very challenging for reasons that I have to say, at least I don't really fully understand, to get them to recognize the benefits and adopt high-speed internet into their homes. So my question for you would be, what kinds of policy approaches do you think might be effective addressing those gaps? I mean, at this point, we have IEPP, which we rolled out this year, which is allowing third-party nonprofit and government partners to pay for internet essentials, which means that it is free for these customers. It's not even $10 a month, and we still struggle to get everybody who's eligible signed up. So my question then is are there policy approaches that you think could address this adoption gap? Is it really an education problem? And how? What are the factors? What are the underlying factors that are leading to this gap? Do we have a good understanding of that? And how might we tackle that problem? So instead of getting 40 out of every 100 IE eligible customers signed up, we get 90 out of every 100 IE eligible customers signed up.
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. And I guess my response is that we need to prioritize. The issue you raise is really important. But I don't think it is as important as those who want it and can't get it. The 10 million students, for instance. And that we need to do a triage here that says, we're going to provide support for coverage to those who want it and need it. And then we'll deal with what are the issues for others. And it's a years ago, I was the CEO of the first high-speed data delivery service over cable television lines. And this was back in the 80s. And one of the hard things that we had was to get people to touch the computer. All right. They thought it was some kind of magical instrument. They were afraid of it. And so we would train our salesmen, for instance, that the first thing you did was you put the keyboard in the potential customer's lap so they had to touch it. But there are all kinds of taboos and cultural things like that enter into this. But I think that we need to make sure that while 100% the perfect would be great, we can't let that get in the way of the good. And the problem right now is we're not stepping up. I should be able to take my Lifeline funds and pay for internet essentials with it, and I can't. Your program, which is a great program that you worked out with Education Superhighway and others, to have block wholesale agreements, if you will, to deliver it. That's great, but that only works in communities where the school board or whomever has the money to pay for it. And Lord knows in the COVID times, local governments aren't exactly flush. So I think we've got to worry about how we close the I want it, but I can't get it, I can't afford it gap first.
Thank you. Appreciate the insight.
I make a comment? I jump in.
Yes.
So I'm Roger Timmerman with Utopia Fiber, and we're a consortium of cities. We build city-owned municipal fiber, but they're all open access. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on open access infrastructure. We've been frustrated because programs like RDOF actually have my rejection letter right here from the FCC, saying that our tiers and things are not eligible. We have a 250 meg symmetrical dedicated minimum with gigabit and 10 gig options, and we get rejected by the current FCC because it doesn't fit their model, right? And yet we compete with those that are, our community-owned networks. We have others in our territory that are getting federal money and subsidies and things, and yet these citizen and resident-owned networks are actually fighting against our own money being used indirectly against us. And yet we can't be eligible for these because they've, structured them that way and they don't support open access. Do Do you think the future is looking good for open access with a new FCC organization coming in? I mean, I wish I could get you back in there. But what are your thoughts on the future of the FCC and the direction and the new administration related to community-owned municipal networks and open access?
So Roger, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing, and you've got one of the right answers. The problem with the Trump FCC is they clung to this quote free market assumption that they shouldn't pick winners and losers in an area in which there isn't a free market to begin with. So I would hope that the Biden FCC would be more responsive. I am encouraged, now there's inside every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. The FCC didn't spend about $9 billion that it could have spent in RDOF, which means that it's going to roll over and be available for RDOF 2, if you will, and they'll add another 5 or 6 billion to it that's going to be budgeted and become available. And one would hope that there will be a new set of rules that will allow you to be able to participate. And what's it, Amon, Idaho? You know this better than I. Is that what it's the name of the town up there, right? What's that?
Which was modeled after us. Ammon.
It was what for you? I'm sorry, Roger, you cut out.
I was just saying we worked with them really closely, and they liked what we had done and kind of did the same open access model where the city owns it and allows private companies to come use it.
It's a great model.
Same thing we do.
I spoke at their opening virtually, and I remember the stories they were telling me about. Well, this is the road that defines our city limits, and on this side of the road there is this much economic activity because that's where our fiber is, and on that side of the road where there is not as much economic activity. Hello, QED, right? I mean, this stuff makes a difference.
Tom?
Yes.
Andy Buffmeyer here.
Hey, Andy.
Don't know if you recall, we worked together, 25 years ago in the launch of the Sprint network.
Andy. Those were the days, huh?
Indeed. Question for you. We have a Utah Education Telehealth network here with expanded broadband fiber. I mean, fiber everywhere. Great fiber backbone in the state of Utah. And the model that we're looking at is, and then I'm part of a team that put together one of the 4 platforms for advanced wireless research that was won by the University of Utah and the city of Salt Lake. And the model we're kind of looking at is fiber to a node, and then particularly in rural areas, getting that last little link out to the home or the institution wirelessly. And the issue, the challenge is spectrum. And do you think there's ever any possibility that we could end up with an open access model for a hunk of spectrum at mid-band? Is there any way for the FCC to allow that to happen? Because now the whole model is big auctions with big dollars, and you then have to go through the winners to get priority access to spectrum at the edge of the network. But fiber to every endpoint, we don't think is where the future is. It's fiber to end nodes and then reaching out with basically 5G broadband to end users at the edge of the network. What's the potential for the FCC to do something with unique and new with spectrum?
Well, Andy, as you know, during our term, we created CFPB, a CFPB. Oh, geez. We created the 4.2 opportunity with a tiered services, of which the first tier is generally available, which is unlicensed. And that's about 70 megahertz. And then on top of that, they were able to bid to get others. I mean, I think that the unlicensed spectrum is always important and is always an issue of debate at the FCC, as the folks who you and I used to work for want more licensed control. But I think we're going to see increasing discussions about unlicensed and 6 gigahertz and 12 gigahertz. And I'm hopeful that there will be more of that spectrum coming along. But again, I think that the spectrum solution, and again, I come out of the wireless business, as you know, as you referenced.
Yeah.
I think the spectrum solution is terrific, but it should be second choice. If we can get fiber, we got to get it. And 5G is not competitive with fiber. I mean, the problem with 5G, and I'm a 5G proponent. The problem with 5G is, as you point out, it's spectrum based, and there is a finite amount of spectrum. And the way in which we control demand for a finite resource is through price. And so I'm not sure that there is sufficient spectrum, licensed or unlicensed, to be a full competitor to the capacity of fiber. And I do know that the availability of it at price is not competitive to fiber. But if it's the alternative where fiber can't be provided with subsidy, then it makes all the sense in the world. And I think our studies showed that that's about 15% of the places.
15%?
Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense.
Thank you all for your questions. We're just running out of time on our agenda. We want to make sure we get to our other presenters. There was a question that came in from Lynn Yoakum. She is our Utah Department of Transportation fiber manager, our fiber queen, as she's well known. She says, with fiber first, how do you see transportation's role in helping deploy fiber backbones? And with that, I'll let you know that she has done amazing things as far as getting fiber across the state freeways and highways. But what are your feelings?
Well, that would be my response, Rebecca. You know, dig once, right? I mean, if fiber is the infrastructure of the 21st century, and we're still building infrastructure of the 20th century, and I don't mean that in a deprecating sense of highways, then there ought to be a marriage of the two.
Right.
And one of the things that used to bug the bejesus out of me, and I'm sure that Lynn's has banged her head against this, is we used to have, and I think we still do have, federal rules that say, well, you know, if you're digging up the streets to replace the water mains, you can't lay fiber at the same point in time because it's two different purposes. And that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's a policy that needs to be changed.
Is that your question, Lynn? Or are you wondering about federal funding? I know that we used a lot of the CARES Act funds and was able to get a significant amount of mileage in our rural areas. Lynn, just go ahead and see.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of rural problems with co-locating with other utilities. I think we've got past that now within the state of Utah. I was wondering about the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018, where they're requiring broadband infrastructure to be put within the roads for carriers, et cetera, and how that was going to carry out. It was interesting to see funding that where everything was appropriated, but no funding was attached with it to come with FHWA and to run those coordinations statewide. So that's been a question on going with broadband, and kind of thought, how do you think transportation can help play a role of what your vision could be?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I'm not familiar with that specific piece of legislation, but as I say, I think that they go hand in hand. When you're building something, you need to be building fiber with it, period.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time and being willing to join us at our Utah Broadband Advisory Council.
Well, Rebecca and all of you, I hope you have a nice day. Thank you very much for the privilege of being invited. And I will sign off.
You drew a great crowd. All righty. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
No, it was either Tom or it was Brad Clausen that's drawn the great crowd. So I'm excited to hear from Brad as well. He is the general field representative for the USDA, and is going to give us some insight on the federal grants for the providers in the rural areas. Take it away, Brad.
Good morning, everyone. I assure you that I'm sure it was Tom, but I will go through my presentation here, and let me share my screen. So it's going to be a PowerPoint, and hopefully you all can see it. All right, so I am Brad Clausen. I am a GFR and for Colorado and Utah. So GFR is a general field rep, so kind of a project manager. I'm sure not an expert, but if you have questions to me, I'll get you in the right direction or get you an answer. So I've been with RD for 6 years, but I've only been with Telecom for 6 months. So I'm the new guy, so you're all the experts. So as far as the program stuff, I can help you with that. And we'll go ahead and go through the slide deck, and I'll try and go through it fairly quick. I think that these are going to be available if you want to look at them later on to get some of the numbers off of here. But what RD's, our mission, we help by providing loans, grants, and loan guarantees that support essential services involved in housing, economic development, healthcare, first responder services and equipment, water, electric, and telecommunications infrastructure. So RD, we like to say we can help develop a town from the ground up. So we have a lot of different areas. We have 3 different agencies, and that's the Rural Utility Service, RUS, who I work for. We have the Rural Housing and the Rural Business Cooperative Services. Across the 3 agencies, we administer over 40 programs. Now, for the telecom and electric, we are administered by the national office. So I am based out of Utah, but we are administered by the national office. The other programs are ran by the state and the national office. So in Utah, there is the state offices in Salt Lake, and then there's 5 field offices. I used to work for Utah, so I know everyone and vice versa. So if something comes to me and it's not in my area, I'll get it to the state office and vice versa. So a little history, started back in 1935 with the Rural Electrification Administration. 1995, RUS kind of became an entity. And from 2010 to the present, we've approved over $7 billion in loans and grants to build out broadband infrastructure. This is Secretary Sonny Perdue. Our core mission at USDA is to increase rural prosperity through boosting economic opportunity in rural America. We know that rural communities need robust, modern infrastructure to thrive, and that includes having access to broadband e-connectivity. So our 4 programs in the rural broadband programs are our infrastructure program, our broadband access, our community connect, and our reconnect. I'll touch on each of these briefly. Before I get into them, if you look on the bottom, there is a link. Our sites are great if you need information. We have some presentation, webinars, information. If you have a general question, that's where I go. So I'd recommend you go there. And that's a pretty long link. But if you do RD and Reconnect or RD Community Connect, it's going to take you there. So if you just want to remember anything, just Google any of those and it will come up and you'll be able to kind of get some of this information. But our infrastructure, you can see that for the last 3 years, we've been fairly consistent on funding at 690 million. However, we haven't used that. So for 2020, we had 98.6 million for 8 loans. But these loans are financed new and improved telecommunication infrastructure, primarily for the benefit of rural population in communities of 5,000 or less. They may serve non-rural subscribers in some cases, and we do accept applications year-round, and that's through the RD Apply online application system. In Utah, we currently have one infrastructure loan going on right now, which I think closes out next year. So standard loan is 2-year principal deferral. Interest rate is at the cost of money. Loan maturity is the life of the facility's finance plus 3 years, and we can help review that loan application. So some of our programs are competitively based. So this isn't. So if someone says, hey, we're looking at an infrastructure loan, we can help prepare the application, get it through. If it's one that's typically more of our grants and we have 500 applications for 100 loans, then we can't really help as much because it truly is based on competition then. So the Rural Broadband Access Loan, Loan Grant, and Loan Guarantee Program. So highlight this real quick. You can see there for 2020, we had 0 loans approved. The reason for that is we had revised regulation published just in March of this year, and we're not accepting applications pending implementation of a new public notice required by the 2018 Farm Bill. So really don't have anything more to put out on this. Program finances the cost of constructing a broadband network. Talks about the speed is 25/3. Its broadband speed requirement is higher for longer loan terms, and it serves rural communities at 20,000 or less, not in an urbanized area, cannot have 3 or more incumbent services providers, and service cannot be in a RUS previously funded area. So a little bit about that. Once again, hopefully we'll have something out this year as far as funds available. And for all of these, there's a Gov delivery that's an email system that if you go and if you're not familiar with it and you want to know when we do updates, at the end's my contact information. Shoot me an email. I'll get you over the stuff so you can go to Gov delivery and sign up for this. And then when some of these application windows or updates are made, you get them the same time I do. So if you're not signed up for Gov delivery, I would highly recommend it. Once again, I don't have the link on here, but just shoot me an email or call me and I'll get your email and get it over to you. So now let's talk about the Community Connect program. So the Community Connect is, not a lot of money last couple of years. We had 33 million in 19 and we had 29 million in FY20. You can see in 19, we processed 100 million, but it was approved for the 24 million. So pretty competitive. For 2020, we had 8 grants approved for 15.7 million. Good news is Utah, we have several Community Connect awardees, so that's good. And it grant funds broadband deployment in eligible rural areas, population 20,000 or less, from 100,000 to 3 million. Service area must not have access to broadband service, and that's defined as 10/1. And then in order, to get the minimum broadband grant speed, it would be 25/3. There is a 15% matching requirements, and the applications are accepted through the Community Connect portal. This just closed, so we just had a window that closed December 23rd, December 23. So we are starting to review those. As a matter of fact, I just got out of a meeting for that. We're just going over the initial review for those. So I don't have the numbers or anything, but
We need someone to, no, thanks, never mind.
Turned around fairly soon on that. We could kind of call this one like a mini reconnect. So kind of a lot of the same things as our reconnect program, but you can see it goes up to 3 million. All right, so let's talk about our reconnect program. So this is fairly new. Really, it rolled out in 18. And for each of the 3 years, we've had 600 million, 550 million, and 655. We've great responses on this. So for 19, we had 146 applications processed for 1.4 billion. We rolled out approved 698 million for 79 projects, 33 states impacted. And good news is Utah was. We had several projects approved in that round 1. Round 2, which is still going on, we had 172 applications submitted. and the window closed April 15th. And as of yesterday, we've had 88 projects announced for 674 million, 35 states impacted. Once again, we had some Utah awardees, and we're still going on a round two. Getting a little feedback there. So when we look at that, we're doing a few entities have had a chance to work on their applications. So we're kind of calling it a second chance, and hopefully those numbers will go up. So when we look at that, it is pre-application expenses incurred for round one, but benefit for round two may be funded, and public notice response period increased from 30 to 45 days. We are actually rolling out regulations on this. So this was kind of a pilot program. Those are going to be out within the next 30 to 60 days for public comment. Once the public comments are made, the regulation will be published. We've always been saying we think there is a round three. There will be a round three now. It looks like about 635 million. So good news on that. And we're hoping maybe that will roll out this spring. It would definitely be late spring, more likely early summer on that. I had talked to Rebecca, and one of the things I think had come up is everybody's busy. How do we complete an application? And one of the things is you can use a consultant. We do see that happen, and that's even for the engineering, so for the pre-application expenses. If you are awarded a reconnect, you can go ahead and be reimbursed for those. Unfortunately, if you have some upfront expenses, and you will, I mean, there's going to be some time and effort in to get an application in, and you're not awarded, any money, obviously you can't request that money back. But it is one of those things, if you are looking at it and say, we just don't have the staff or the time or to do that, you can look at using a consultant to help you. And I'm sure they would be able to tell you about their success rate or things to look at. So just one of the things to be aware of on that. So there's three different types for the reconnect. It's loan, combo, and grant. The money was kind of split up thirds across the board. Really won't go into that, but you would ask, why would anyone do a loan if they could do a grant? And one of the reasons is, if you look on a grant, there's a 25% match. And if you have a $8 million project and you don't have $2 million to do front for the match, you could just do a loan. So that's kind of why that is there. So distant learning and telemedicine grant program, the basics on that is, this is where we are helping with, and it really isn't it's different because this isn't necessarily broadband. This is universities, health centers, remote learning, those sort of things. So you can see that we had a pretty busy. What happened with COVID is this is a lot. So we had our first round, we had 276 applications, and then we had some CARES money come through, and we ended up having 534 applications received. And for 252 million, we only had 24 million available on that. So a lot of interest on that. Those awards should be announced any day now. So we've had a lot of people that apply that have come back and said, okay, where are you at? Right now, the desk getting ready to be signed. So we should hear something soon on those announcements. And we're going to go ahead and announce the winners, and people that didn't get an email or a letter saying, hey, you weren't selected as well. Try and do that about at the same time, but we should see that any day now. All right, so, and distant learning means the real-time interactive delivery of curriculum via telecommunication, and then of course telemedicine. I think we're probably all familiar with those. Some historic numbers, you can see that 7.7 billion there. Really a lot of it is the infrastructure. Reconnect is up there for a fairly new program, and with the numbers we have, like the 600 million, you can see it's going to continue to grow. Not going to go through this. General field reps. So GFRs typically have 1 to 2 states. I have Colorado and Utah. If you have programs or interested in who GFR is in a different state, you can just, once again, like I said, RD, you could Google RD GFR and this map will come up, or you can get a hold of me and I can let you know. Here's some of our key contacts. I'm not going to discuss that. Here is my information. So Brad Clausen, GFR, there's my cell phone number and my email. And I think that was it. It was pretty fast, but I am here for questions. If you have anything offline, please feel free to reach out to me. That really is what we're here, is to get our money utilized. Love to say it's, keep it local. If we can spend a lot of it in Utah, that's what I'm here for. So we really are looking to kind of help support you in order to get some applications in and continue kind of the success we've had in Utah.
Excellent, Brad. Thank you for that information. If you'll stop sharing, then we'll get ready for our next presenter. But I do have a question real quick for you. I think that others might have is, who can apply for the rural broadband access or the Community Connect? Can it be not only a provider, but can communities apply for these as well?
A community can, but it has to, let me see if I can figure out how to stop sharing here.
Oh, I think you have.
Oh, okay, great. So if they want a partnership, so what we don't want is if a community says, hey, we'd love to be an internet provider, and they have no experience, then we would have to look at their financials. If we give them government money, are they going to be able to be successful? So they can partner up with someone in order to do that. So we can look and say, hey, someone that they partnered with has that experience, they're going to be able to go forward. What we don't want to do is give someone $1 million and they say, oh, we took it on and spent some government money, aren't able to complete the project, and we have a community without internet. So that's what we look at on that. Before we give government money, we have to see that they're going to be a viable organization and they're able to complete the task.
Okay, and I guess, are there examples, or you don't need to give me an example, but yes or no, have there been communities that have done that in public-private partnerships?
So not in Utah.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean
other places.
Not that I'm aware of, but I am the new guy, and I can look into that and see if there is. We always hear that too, is how can we do this? Give me a call and I can always go to some more seasoned GFRs, and and that's typically what I do for anything. Is if I don't know
and I'm thinking the public-private partnership where you're looking at getting a consultant, like if a community were willing to pay for the consultant, that might be just the ticket to spur a provider to apply. And then that also the consultant, if they are awarded the grant funds, can that come out of the grant funds, or they can request additional to pay for that consultant? I just want to clarify that.
So on most of our grants, there's a matching portion. So where it comes out of, would it be an eligible expense? Yes, it would. So, when you look and say, okay, where would that come out of? Typically in the matching funds, that's the first money that's spent. So it would come out of your matching funds, but it's out of that total project cost. So yes, it could be, taken out of that project cost.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if you do have any other questions, Brad, I know you shared that in the PowerPoint, but if you wouldn't mind putting your contact information in the chat box, then people can grab it really quick. And next we have the UETN CARES Act funds update. So we have Kelleigh Cole with the Utah Education Telehealth Network, and she is the Strategic Initiatives Manager, correct? And boy, she was given a bucket full this last year to manage, and I think she did a great job. So we'll turn the time over to her. Thanks.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for letting me give an update. I was supposed to give an update. I think it was the last meeting, whenever that was, and I was sick with just a normal cold, not a COVID cold. So I was not able to participate in this meeting. So I apologize for that. So it's been a little bit of time since I've been able to kind of update people on what's been happening with our CARES funding. As Rebecca mentioned, UETN was given the responsibility to oversee a large chunk of the CARES money. We were approached by the legislature over the summer and asked to put forward a plan with multiple projects from multiple stakeholders. And we presented the plan to the legislature, and they were very supportive of us continuing. And so I'm just going to go through and just give you an update on the projects that we have completed and are just wrapping up, and just kind of the general landscape of what's happening. So our project, we've been referring to it as the Public and Higher Education Technology Initiative. And as you know, the CARES Act is to provide long-lasting benefits to students, the community, and the state of Utah as we respond to the health emergency created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so as we evaluated projects, there were some federal requirements that we had to look at. First of all, it had to be something that was responding to the pandemic. We were asked to have those items operational by December 30th of 2020. So as many of you know, there was an extension granted by the federal government. That was kind of granted very last minute. But when that extension was granted, we were very close to being completed with all of the projects. And so what we did with that extension is we essentially push pause on all of our projects that were almost wrapped up anyway, and just told people to kind of take the holidays off. And now we're just doing wrap up for those activities. But we were pretty close when the extension was granted. So the biggest impact was to give us just a little bit of breathing room to wrap up. The expenses had to be from March 1st to December 30th, 2020 in the original bill. And we could not put anything in our CARES Act funding that was approved in a state budget as of March 27th. There were a few things that actually were right on that line that we had to get some clarification on. But that was the line that we followed according to federal guidelines. If it was anything that was in a budget that was signed by the governor by March 27th, then it was not eligible for CARES funding. So when we worked with our partners, what we had asked for, they had to do a project proposal with a detailed timeline that demonstrated that they could be operational by December 30th. And then once they were approved, we asked them to do weekly reporting so that we were able to figure out if anything was falling behind or if we needed to step in and help with anything. So in a few cases, people had to change vendors in order to meet the deadline. So some of those things that came up, we just sort of worked through those issues to make sure that we could complete the projects. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kind of buckets of projects that we had. There were some funds that went towards our UETN network that serves all of those stakeholders. And so we did some infrastructure upgrades. There were some upgrades that we could do to our backbone speeds before the end of the year. And so we did do some of the upgrades. Obviously, if we would have had, a longer time frame initially, we might have seen more of those types of projects. We did some security enhancements on our network. We did some network instrumentation. We did enhanced filtering. We paid for some of the filtering expenses from our network. There were some upgrades to the telehealth network in the sense of like upgraded firewalls and things like that. They were able to secure a better telemedicine platform. And then they also are doing a really interesting program that I'm sure maybe at some point we should get a presentation on, but they were able to secure some nursing kits to give to all of the Title I schools in Utah that are remote nursing kits for situations where there's not a nurse on site. So it helps it take vitals and things so that they can have some sort of services within the school. Especially during COVID, that was kind of a really important project that kind of came together later on, but that I think will be interesting to track over time. And then UETN also, we did, let's see, actually, I'm going to go on to some of the other projects because I think I only have a few minutes. As many of you know, one of the things that we were able to do during this program was we were able to give some funding to home internet. And that was done for school children and their families. And so we partnered with the US Board of Education, and they were able to work with about 40 different applicants. So some districts and then some charter schools, and they were able to secure home internet services So it was a combination of actual wired services to the home, and then there were some hotspots as well that were purchased, and they were able to do 1-year contracts to get those students through the current school year. And that's a program that they will be doing an evaluation of, and I'm really interested to hear the feedback on that program. And I think that there were a lot of families that were able to benefit from that, and a lot of the partners that are on this meeting did participate as the vendors. And so we appreciate you helping us do prepaid contracts and things that really helped us to be able to make that program happen. And then the other home broadband program that's on a smaller scale than the USBE program was that we did work with the state library, and there were a group of libraries that had requested hotspot lending programs to help with their with patrons that weren't able to go into the library and use the computers, and so there were quite a few libraries that now have checkout programs that they check out hotspots for people to use. And we were able to pay for a year of service. And then I believe that State Library is working on a sustainability plan with those locations for a more long-term solution, so that they can offer some assistance to people on a temporary basis. And I think it's just kind of, most of them are just doing like a circulation of a few weeks kind of thing for those devices. So overall, and I should have mentioned this up front, overall we did 250 projects, which is a lot of projects. And there were about 150 or so partners that we worked with. And those include all of the higher education institutions. So colleges, universities, and tech colleges as well were participating. K-12, charter schools, libraries, and the healthcare facilities that are tied to the Utah Telehealth Network were also included in these projects. And so the higher ed projects, so we, with all the colleges and universities, we gave them the opportunity to apply for projects in basically 5 key areas. So we had network enhancements, which mostly looked like that were mostly adding additional Wi-Fi capacity, wireless capacity on campus to all of the campuses around the state. So that was a big project. We offered them the opportunity to apply for funds for IT security, software for online learning. They were able to apply for that. They were able to apply for funding to lend out laptops to students. So not every single school did that, but the majority of them did do some sort of laptop lending program. The University of Utah did a very large program where I think they have about 1,000 laptops in circulation, and they are all lent out. So there was definitely a need to get those devices, and they also lent out some hotspots as well. We purchased quite a bit. We purchased some longer term consortium software products for higher ed and for K-12. So there were Zoom contracts, Canvas contracts, DocuSign, Box, WebEx. So lots of different software to help with the with educating the students off campus. We also funded some distance learning opportunities. And so the Use Distance Learning, their shop applied for some funding to do programs that they had to adapt for remote learning. And so they were doing computer programming skills, some STEM, some test prep, summer bridge programs. They had kind of a menu of a few things that they were doing. And then on the professional development side, if any of you are, have teachers in your home or in your family, we did an incentive program to reward teachers for completing professional development that helped them learn how to more effectively teach online. So we had a large menu of classes that they could choose from, and then they were given a gift card to compensate them for their time for taking those classes. So those are the major buckets that we that we participated in. And like I said, we're getting very close to wrapping up. Most of the reimbursements for the projects have been submitted and are out the door. And we just have a few that we're wrapping up at this point, but it's definitely been a very intense couple of months for everybody. And we would not have been able to do this without all of these partners coming together. And like I said, I mean, we had about 250 projects going at the same time that we've been tracking and doing reimbursements for. And one of the things that we were very determined to do was to have everything sort of audit ready, so that if we are audited on the program, that we have all of the receipts and everything, pictures of devices and where they are, and inventories of all of the items that we've purchased, so that we can really, you know, track what's happened. But thank you for letting me present. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think that these programs will have a long-term impact. Oh, and one of the things I forgot to say is that the K-12, there was one of our major projects actually was doing wireless upgrades to K-12 schools. And so that was a lot of Wi-Fi 6 equipment. That was some CBRS equipment. And, you know, that was very challenging because we were on a deadline, and we're doing this during school a lot of times on the weekends. The team was out there trying to install enhanced Wi-Fi in the schools, but I think that that was a project that I think is going to have a benefit for a long time to come. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That was excellent, Kelleigh. In the interest of time, I think we'll move on. But if we have time at the end, then we'll ask some questions. And having brought up that subject about the technology and the wireless, we have next with us Jason Eyre, who was the technology department coordinator for the Murray School District. And he had also previously served at Garfield. And he's going to talk about some of this technology that they installed in the schools for use in the communities. And just so you're aware, I mean, that is incredible, Kelleigh. As many of you know, she's my predecessor. I would say that the UETN is very, very fortunate to have grabbed her up, to have Kelleigh working for them. A little thing that she did in addition to all of this was to get us locations where public Wi-Fi is available at the school, in the parking lots where the kids could not get inside the building. Early on, we did a map, and that is at our broadband.utah, or is now business.utah.gov/broadband site. And I will share that link with you when I can. So Jason, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Eyre. I'm the Technology Department Coordinator at Murray City School District. I recognize many of you having worked in other industries and even some internet industries down in Southern Utah. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I think it was absolutely phenomenal to have Tom Wheeler kick us off and to talk about almost everything we're trying to do, what his vision entails. We're trying to use wireless and some wireless technologies to actually as a secondary thing to kind of help fill in the holes where fiber optics and other technologies can't necessarily meet there. We're also trying to take care of, there's a huge pain point with distance learning and economic challenges and other things with students who don't have access to learning at home. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is Murray School District's and UETN's efforts to try and fill this in. Our biggest goal with this program is that we're trying to provide a Wi-Fi experience for our students at home that runs as well as in the schools. This vision started in Garfield District, where there weren't really any cellular networks, but yet everybody could see the school building from their home. And so we looked at what if we could put this on the school building, what would this do for us? We partnered with UETN in hopes that this could be more than just a small effort in Garfield at that time. And then I found a job in Murray that paid significantly more and couldn't afford not to come up here. So that's why I'm at Murray and decided to move from a rural focus to an urban focus. CBRS was actually what Tom was talking about, Tom Wheeler, where they're making spectrum available without having expensive licensing in a shared spectrum model. This was being tested as he was at the FCC, and was some of the details and databases were being built. We were able to get access to this technology in April of 2019. We were the first K through 12 school in the world to have and use this specific type of LTE and this type of technology. We used it to prove some concepts at UETN's Tech Summit. We installed cameras, and that's the picture you're seeing on your screen, at a remote part of our campus where we never had coverage using LTE. On the driver's ed shed, so we could watch the kids and make sure that they weren't having horseplay when they were getting in their accidents on the range. We used we did conferences in Provo and Denver to kind of prove that this could move around and be done. At one of our schools, we brought it up during the pandemic and it kind of reached, but it didn't. And we learned a few things as we went through that experience. Just some very basics. And again, I am going really fast and I apologize for that. I will send this slideshow out so that you can look at a little more detail. CBRS sits between the two Wi-Fi bands. It's really important to know that it's not something that's weird that's going to cause cancer or some of those other things, especially where we're doing this at our schools. It is blocked by thick walls and buildings. It does run indoor and outdoor. It's lower power. Trees also have issues. We're in the middle of kind of an evolution in CBRS. The first generation of radios look like the one on the left here. They point straight down. They cover about 900 feet. They're designed for a campus. We're now getting access, and Murray, we got one of the first in the world that was made by Ruckus. That is a generation 2 that uses antennas that look more like your cellular antennas. And those antennas are just, as you can see here, they're sitting on the side of our school, but they help us focus the signal. They're designed to go up to a mile, but with trees and buildings, we don't make it that far. But our goal is we're a very small school district in an urban area, and we're learning and showing the world how this works in an urban setting. And then drop a pandemic on top of all this. We started this in April of 2019. Our goal was to reach economic challenges, and it's so interesting to see this slide in context of Tom Wheeler's comments. We found during the pandemic, cultural language were also two very different things. Kind of going to Joe's question of how do we solve the adoption gap? We've got to make it easy for people, and sometimes we have to break barriers to people who don't believe in the internet at all, when it is the only way their students can learn at home. And then the last one is capacity. We saw students that were on different types of connections that were being oversubscribed, or we were causing the oversubscription with having multiple kids trying to Zoom at the same time as mom and dad, as younger children were trying to stream videos so that they weren't in everybody's way. There was just a multitude of problems that the pandemic brought together. We used some of the CARES funding to actually implement district-wide in all of our schools access points for LTE inside and outside our buildings. We bought the Generation 1 access points with this money because of the time frame and received a contractual upgrade to get the Generation 2 as soon as they come off the assembly line, and they're being built right now. Will come out at the end of February. Kelleigh Cole talked a little bit about the USB Broadband Grant. We needed devices to connect to the towers, or the mini towers that we were putting on our schools. We had highlighted with the pandemic that households with 3 or more kids and low economic areas were the areas where we needed to point these radios to. These are actually 2 heat maps superimposed over each other. The little dots are households with 3 or more kids. The bigger, kind of less focused, are low impact or economically challenged. So as we've prioritized and triaged our network, we're trying to reach the combination of these 2 together as we build our network out. We used Cradle Point, which was great because we can use geographic mapping and we can watch the devices remotely come alive as we point the radios at them. We also used Cradle Point Technologies to help us heat map. This constitutes 7 radios and what it's doing for us right now in our area. Again, this spring we'll have those 7 increased up to 26 as they come off the assembly line. And we're really excited to see what this is going to do for our students. It's really important, as I'm speaking to the broadband providers around the state, you need to know that we're not providing Netflix, we're not providing Hulu, we're not providing streaming services outside of YouTube videos that our teachers have approved. Our goal with this network is to help the kids do the live learning that Tom Wheeler talked about. We call it educational broadband, so that we're providing kind of an umbrella over our area where our students can learn just like they're in the classroom at home, But at the same time, we don't want to replace the need for their normal ISP. We actually want their normal ISP to work better because we're taking them off of it and taking the pressure off so the rest of the family can conduct their business or get their entertainment and do things they need to. And that's what I've got, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
That was really good. A lot of information in a short amount of time. So we have a minute. If anybody has a question for either Kelleigh or Jason, this might be a good time to do that.
Rebecca, I don't see any questions, but we are doing a press event with the governor on Thursday. He's going to symbolically connect our network for us when we actually start taking it out to parents. It potentially, from the media, we've heard it could be live streamed on MSNBC if there are not impeachment proceedings. So that is a place to look and see. Sorry about the other information, but we have invited all the local news media. Cradle Point and Ruckus will be here with us as well to answer questions. And if I may just wrap up, I really want to thank Utopia for helping us during the pandemic as well. They've been a great local partner for us and have helped us bring up things. Also think would like to thank Comcast. We were able to get all but 13% of our students connected by using that Comcast low income product. What we hope is this will sit over top of that so that they can use that for their family essentials and for their entertainment and things. And this can take those Zoom meetings off that service and make it so they don't have to worry about caps or other little things.
That's great,
Jason. I mean, we're all in it together. We're totally committed to the well-being of these students, and really glad that IE was such a success here in Murray. And as I said in the chat, I'm a Murray resident. I love this LTE project that you guys are doing. I think it's just amazing, really groundbreaking, and yeah, helping a lot of these kids without access get what they need, and it's really a remarkable effort. So thank you.
You're absolutely welcome, and we hope as we break maybe some of the cultural barriers, that might open them up to more adopting, to break the adoption gap that you spoke to earlier too, Joe, because I do think that's real.
I think we could give kudos to all of our providers. I know across the state, there were so many that reached out and connections that were made quickly to serve the students and their households from this. This is very interesting, your technology that you developed, and I'm hoping that you will be able to share it in other districts. Speaking of the school districts, we now have a San Juan County update, which includes the San Juan School District and some innovative things that they did to connect their students and spread across the tribal lands that did not have anything at all. We have three, I'm not sure how they want to break it up. I'm hoping they've talked among themselves. Jeff Egly with UETN, who has worked very closely with Jared Anderson, who is the chief operations, the COO. I'm just not even going to go there, with Emery Telcom, and Eyre Brewer, who is the technology director at the San Juan School District. So I will turn it over to you three.
Rebecca, this is Jeff Egly. I'll jump in quick and then leave room for Jared Anderson and Eyre Brewer really to provide the detail on what each are doing. The one thing I wanted to just kind of lead out on is we've provided updates to this group in the past. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. As we have, from the UETN perspective, provided an update on our efforts to extend fiber-based broadband south of Blanding, Utah, partnering with Emery Telcom. It's been a major effort and partnership to get that extended, and major milestone was reached late in 2020, where now communities of Bluff and Montezuma Creek, those schools are lit on fiber now. That's huge. We've supported those for years on microwaves. So we're really excited to see those services come up. It's been a major push, a long process on the right-of-way and permitting process. We hope to see White Mesa and the library with the U Tribe come online in the near future as well. But really exciting to see that happen and see those fiber services come in. And with that said, I'll defer to Jared Anderson and then Aaron Brewer to discuss the work they have underway in San Juan. There's a great deal of activity there.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. I'm Jared Anderson, COO with Emery Telecom. And just to dovetail onto what Jeff said, I wanted to show a couple of maps for those that aren't super familiar with that area of the state. Like Jeff said, it was significant efforts in permitting and construction and getting down to those areas. In jumping forward to some of the maps, the pinpoints show schools, educational centers, libraries, things of that nature that we connected to fiber. This is the Blanding area, and then moving on down to Bluff, that's completed. Also over to Montezuma Creek, those schools are connected as well. And so the next phase of the project takes us to Mexican Hat and Halchita. And that's this section right here that needs to be built. It's in permitting right now. We're making good progress. And that's actually part of a USDA award matching grant. And the communities of Mexican Hat and Halchita will get fiber to the home as part of that project. And then Emery Telecom on its own is building out the community of Bluff fiber to the home. And so that community will also have full gig speeds. The far leg of the project and the last section is, again, a UETN phase 2 project going all the way from Mexican Hat over into Navajo Mountain and connecting a couple of schools along the way in Monument Valley. The total route miles of this build, trunk mileage, is a little bit over 200. So it's a giant build to get to very remote portions of Utah that are drastically underserved. We're excited for the USDA partnership, for the UETN partnerships. Those have been great and instrumental in bringing connectivity to these areas. So just wanted to throw a couple of maps that show the detail of where we're going with it. So that being said, I'll turn the time over to Aaron.
Thanks. And I think I want to express my thanks to UETN and Emery Telecom for the support. That's been absolutely vital for us to be able to show that and hook those schools up, and that makes such a big difference. I guess that's kind of where our project came from. I was appreciative of the map. I've got a couple maps too. We've built we're building the backbone and other portions of this project, and we've kind of got our own verbiage that we've put together. We've got our main distribution towers. Some of these are UETN, some are ours, some are UNHS. We've also partnered with Elk Petroleum, who has a number of wells in the Montezuma Creek Aneth area to utilize their towers. We have towers located at chapter houses. In the state of Utah, we have 5 or 6 chapters that we work with, if you include the Denahotso chapter, which kind of takes a big chunk out of Halchita and up to Rapley Ridge. So we've worked very closely with chapters to try and get permission and support and those things. And then we have other towers that we built as this process: Douglas Mesa, Lansing Mesa, and McElmo. McElmo's being built today. Douglas Mesa is done. Lansing Mesa will be coming online, and I'll show you those on our MDT. Then we have smaller towers. They're typically just little 19, 20-foot towers that are on home sites at residential locations. We've built, we're still needing to build some of those, but we've built quite a number of those, and then poles. So our anything you see in yellow on this map has been completed. These are the 2 towers. This one's being actually worked on today. And this is the Lansing Mesa tower that looks over Aneth proper, which is just right down here. We would love to see that fiber come down the line to Aneth as well. If there are any future ideas for expansion, we've got a number of kids there.
Hey, Aaron?
Yes.
This is Jeff. Hey, could I just chime in real quick and just for context for everybody, if you don't know, the San Juan School District received CARES funding actually to build this out to increase connectivity to students, and I thought I'd just make sure folks understand that that's a project. That's how that funding came about. You've got it's primarily all CARES funding. Is that correct?
Yes, primarily all CARES funding. And I appreciate that. I sometimes forget who I'm talking to. So those are the main distribution towers. And then you'll see our IDTs, and we've got about half of those built. This is out in that Navajo Mountain area that we'll be getting fiber to soon-ish. And then we have our nodes, which are just the power poles or poles that have radios. They'll pass signal on, and the way it ends up, these are locations of students. As I said, the yellows are installed right now. They're not lit up, but they're installed on the homes. And so we've got a big group here in Monument Valley. Students are right here. This is Halchita, and then we have Bluff students and Whitehorse High School students over in this area. We're still waiting for those 2 towers to be built before we've gotten real serious about those. But the whole system then comes together, and we've got some licensed links, some unlicensed links, some point to multi-point radios, and some point-to-point radios to help us carry that signal. With the added capacity of Emery Telecom and UETN's fiber, that's going to really help our backhaul and help us with our data. Up to this point, there wasn't a viable option for internet. Really, they used HughesNet a lot in this area. There was also some use of hotspots and things like that. So our first initial reaction was to get some hotspots on board, and we did get those out. We're still employing those. Those are still being used by students, but as everybody knows, they're limited connectivity, they're limited capacity, and so this was our next best thought, and we've had a lot of support in it, and we appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions or?
I have a question for you. Oh, did somebody else? What are the speeds that you're able to get the range to the homes? And I just wanted to commend you on this. You know, Aaron took on, it's unbelievable. He's turned into a broadband provider, so to speak, or a conductor orchestrating all of this to get the internet to these households. Is it similar to the Murray School at all, where that's only that they're only receiving what is sent through the school system, or where it's not CBRS? Is it just they're limited anyway?
Yes, that's a great question. That's a great question. It is limited, and as we've talked to parents and chapter officials and everybody, you know, there's no Netflix or Hulu or any of that. They do have approved YouTube. It's very much just an extension of our LAN, similar to what we have in our schools. So it is filtered and all of those good things, you know, that we need to have in place. And we did a little research on what our video meetings needed, because one thing I maybe failed to mention was March. When we come back to school in March, these students will have been out of school for an entire calendar year. And these are students that are large amounts are English language learners, as we've classified them. There's a lot of need. This is one of our highest needs. And so we've really tried to find ways to serve students at their home in the most efficient way possible. So we feel like we wanted to make sure that we didn't step on anybody's toes with the Community Connect grant we talked about earlier. With that 10-1 threshold, we're going to keep it below that so that it doesn't disqualify anybody from those funds, because as we talked about how Cheetah, Mexican Hat's going to be built out, those are going to be great, and those will be preferable to our system once those are in and people have them in their homes, I think.
Good, great. All right, if we could have him stop sharing his screen. And I do want to make note of the little notes that have been in the chat box because it's true. UDOT and Emery Telecom have both been instrumental in these projects, but UDOT has played a huge role in getting the fiber to San Juan. And I just want to share that it's, like I said, it's been almost 3 years since I started this position, and we were talking about the San Juan project. It is now finally getting done, and it's not because of a lack of effort on these people's part. It was just obstacle after obstacle of getting permitting and federal challenges and whatnot. And so this is great that they're able to use these funds to get this in. And also UDOT and Emery Telecom are working on the Aneth Fiber project. So we are appreciative of all of you that have worked so hard, and we will soon have the state completely lit up. I have no doubt. We have next, Jess Pavel, if I said that correctly, Jess. She is a legislative assistant with the U.S. Senate. She's in Senator Romney's office and was working closely with him in this funding, the federal funding. And I asked her if she would just come for a few minutes and give a high-level overview of what was approved at the most recent in stimulus. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me join today. As Rebecca said, I'm Jess Pavel. I work for Senator Romney. I primarily handle his healthcare portfolio, actually, but as we were working through the COVID negotiations with the bipartisan group of 908, I was also tasked with managing the broadband component. So I've been brought into the broadband fold over the last several months. Both the bill that we worked on in the 908 group and the passed bill in the COVID relief recognizes the pandemic strain and supports individuals, students, and businesses in their ability to connect online, both for work and for school. So some of the key issues the committees were able to address by including $7 billion in funding for a variety of broadband issues. Some of the highlights of that include extension of the FCC telehealth program that was a part of the original CARES Act passed almost a year ago at this point. And that is in the amount of $250 million. A second component of it is a new emergency broadband benefit program, which is housed under the FCC, which is a $3.2 billion program. Eligible households can receive a discount of up to $50 or up to $75 if they are located on tribal lands. And this would be to offset the cost of internet service and a subsidy for low-cost devices like computers and tablets. Households that would qualify for this benefit would include those with children who qualify for free and reduced lunch program, Pell Grant recipients, those who are recently laid off or furloughed, and an individual who qualifies for the Lifeline program, or someone for a low-income COVID-19 discount program offered by internet service providers. One of the other sections of it, so I think there's probably a few big buckets. You have healthcare, you have this new program, you have a catch-all bucket of programs that would be funding for FCC that would collect detailed better broadband maps, that would be for connecting minority communities, a dedicated tribal broadband connectivity program, and then really promoting broadband expansion to unserved Americans across the country. So that's sort of one bucket. And then the last is a package of more consumer product bills that would be really more toward consumer safety, fighting counterfeit products from foreign countries that come through the ports, empowering FTC, and making sure that some of the rip and replace communication securities programs are fully funded, able to move forward, and there's some expansion of eligible uses. But I think the most important buckets are connecting unserved homes, supporting those who are struggling to be able to afford broadband and connectivity, and then supporting some of the telehealth measures that needed an extension and some additional funding.
Thanks, Jess. I think the biggest challenge is probably going to be possibly a timeline. We're going to be, utilizing these funds as quickly as we can. Any thoughts? I'm sorry. I think I'm getting COVID. I'm like Kelleigh. I think I've got it. My husband's in the other room and he's got it. I'm losing it fast. Please, Jess.
So timeline on this is that?
Yeah, and is it NTIA that's going to be administering those funds?
Yes, NTIA will be responsible for majority of the funds through this, specifically on connecting minorities, the tribal broadband connectivity grants programs, and then broadband expansion through unserved Americans. Some of the other funds will go through the FCC, and then some will also be in conjunction with FTC. So those will be sort of the big buckets, but NTIA will play a major role in developing some of the grants programs and sending out some of the funding. The timelines, that was one of the biggest challenges when we had worked on the original idea for what a bipartisan proposal would be, and we were thinking about ways that we could stand up new builds. Making sure that some of the programs could be enacted quickly and connect communities quickly, since we had always been thinking about this as a immediate relief or short-term relief to get through Q1. And so a lot of the programs, there's a great urgency to get money out the door as quickly as possible, which is why in this you'll see, with the exception of that one program, most funding will flow through existing funding streams so that there isn't a large challenge or a burden with administering some of the funds, or there's not a burden on states and localities to implement a new a way of securing funds, applying for funds. They want to use as many of the same channels as possible.
Good. That's good. Makes sense, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for stopping in all the way from BC for us today. We have just a few minutes left. I think we might run over, so anybody that's able to stay with us a little bit longer, we're glad to have you. I just wanted to tell you a couple of things. And if you can hang on, Jess, maybe if anybody has some questions afterwards that they could ask you. I know we have a few people here that I probably don't have on my email list, and I did forward this to a few people, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're on my email list. Providers and such, those that have been coming to the Broadband Advisory Council in the past. If anybody would like to be added, please send me an email and I'll put my email address in here. If you didn't get it from me or if it was forwarded to you from somebody else, and if you would like to keep coming to our meetings, if not, don't send me your email address. I don't want to use up space in your email box. And we're going to take just a few minutes to give a quick update on what's happening with our own efforts here on the state level with the Broadband Initiative. I'm not seeing Sarah Young. She's with the Utah State Board of Education. I was hoping that she might be able to provide a little bit of insight, but I think we do have Vikram Ravi here and if Olivia's here, if you just like to take a couple of minutes. And I had some questions on our agenda. So depending upon your ability to stay on and participate, we would love to have some feedback from providers and any public officials and those leaders that are key stakeholders in this.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm happy to provide a couple of updates on the pieces of the initiative that we've been working on. As a reminder, my name is Olivia. I work for the International Rescue Committee in Salt Lake City, which is one of Utah's 2 refugee resettlement agencies. And I also run the policy group for Utah Communities Connect, which is the group in Utah that's been working for the past 5 or 6 years on the digital divide across the state and hosts a variety of direct service providers like myself from the refugee background. I know Daniel from United Way, who introduced himself today, is also participating in a variety of private players. And we have been working closely with the State Board of Education on a couple of solutions on the state level to address the digital divide in Utah specifically. And there are 2 pieces that are sort of moving forward from that frame. And we approach connection from the perspective that there are several different components that all Utahns will need in order to truly be able to access telehealth or online school or employment. And that's infrastructure, which this group has pioneered for several years, but also things like devices, subscription availability, technical support, accessible content, all of those pieces. So to address those, the first solution that we're forwarding through the legislature this year is the creation of a digital adoption coordinator and a digital adoption grant program in the Utah State Libraries Division under the Department of Heritage and Arts. And this will be submitted as a request for appropriations. It has been marked as the 4th of 6 funding priorities by the state board, and they'll be spearheading that piece moving forward. And the purpose of that particular expansion of programming is to invest in some of the solutions that we've seen pop up with CARES Act funding, or some of those longer term solutions we've been engaged in as a coalition to address the digital divide. So that's things like one-on-one digital literacy training programs. It's things like investing in device refurbishment ecosystems and getting older devices in a state to be donated to community members in need. Solutions along that line. And then the second solution that we'll be forwarding legislatively this year is a statewide digital connectivity plan, which takes the work that we've done in relation to infrastructure and infrastructure mapping and data development on that piece and extends it into these other components of connection. So we're really able to better measure what our return on investment in terms of actual connection is and then can be in the future with other sort of data pieces as reference points, and that will be forwarded by Representative Stratton. And once we have a bill text for that, the file's been opened, but once there's a text, we'll be sure to send it to Rebecca to circulate to this group for any feedback folks may have, and also some opportunities for demonstrating support for that particular piece, as we know that the infrastructure and telecoms community is a critical player in all of these areas. And that's all of the updates I have for today. Vikram or Rebecca, are there other pieces that you'd like me to shine some light on?
No, I don't. Other than to say that if you saw the governor's budget this week, it looks like he has a huge interest and focus on broadband. So we'll see how the legislature plays that out. Do we have any questions or some discussion either for Jess, considering the CARES Act funds, or the state initiative? I will just leave it open for a minute or two. We can take longer. Okay, if we don't have anything else, don't say we didn't warn you. But please, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I learned about this Zoom feature accidentally, I think, but I noticed that if you're multitasking, and I should have shared this at the beginning, if you're multitasking and you're typing at the same time, and then you're pausing and you're thinking, and you hold your space bar for 3 seconds, did you know that that's a feature on Zoom that will unmute you? If you didn't know that before, you do now. So the next meeting you go into, if you're going to type, no problem. I believe in multitasking, but don't sit on your space bar for more than 3 seconds. Anything else, anyone? Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Andy, that we don't have, no, it was not Andy, Keith Heaton. He says, oh, I guess we're not getting Costa Vida again today. So hopefully someday in the future, we will be meeting in person. It's nice to see some of you. Haven't seen everybody. If you want to pop open your cameras, it's been great to see the names of people across the state that have been here for our meeting, and any feedback on, you know, meeting more frequently. I guess that might be all on me as far as that challenge to take on, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to, but there's so much that's happening right now. It just seems like we just can't keep up. We're gonna keep meeting quarterly. I think we've already lost a few people. So I would say it's probably a good time to sign off. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.